Fusing the three together with Pilates, strength and cardio just seemed to be like the ultimate combo for our consumers. The franchisees are really sort of buying into what we're doing. They're making money. The same consumer that goes to a boutique concept generally does not go to a big club. So there's so many intangible success factors. You know, you've got your community connection, customer experience, customer validation, progression. I think specialization is a really, really big one. The innovation button needs to be on all the time. We are the black sheep of the Pilates industry.
Welcome to this week's episode of Lifts. Mo, my co-host, how are you doing today?
I'm good. I'm technically on vacation this week, even though I feel like I've been holed up in this bedroom for the last couple of days. But I am in an island called Kiwa, South Carolina. A hurricane is apparently on the way, from what I understand. It's making its way, I think, through the Bahamas right now. But it's awesome. If you haven't been here, Matthew, I know you're out on the West Coast. Michael, I know you're our guest here's new to the States, but it's gorgeous here. It's just a beautiful area of South Carolina. It's about 30 minutes away from Charleston. Great golfing, great running, great biking, great for kids. So yeah, we're having a really good time.
Well, we've got a very special guest who's also a non-American living here. Now I feel I've got someone who I can bond with almost. So yeah, maybe you can introduce us to our guest today, Mo.
Yeah, I'm excited for what we're going to be talking about today. We're going to be spotlighting one of the fastest growing movements in fitness right now, which is Pilates. We've been talking a lot about Pilates, Matthew, for seems like over a year on this podcast. And what started as a niche studio experience has really exploded into a international trend. There's new formats, there's fresh concepts, and it's reaching members in every market. At the center of this wave is our guest for this episode, Michael Ramsey, who's the co-founder of Strong Pilates. Strong has reimagined Pilates by fusing it with performance-based training, building a model that is both scalable and sticky, which we're going to get into. They've recently hit the 100 studio milestone. I was excited to be a part of that. That was last weekend. Expanded into multiple countries, and they're now making a major push and entrance into the US market, so much so that both Michael and his co-founder Mark have actually made the big move to the States. With Michael today, we're going to explore the rise of Pilates, how consumer preferences are shifting, and the role that platforms like ClassPass are playing in helping fuel that growth. But I know that is a controversial topic. So Michael, I know we've been trying to get you on for a while. Welcome to Lifts.
Thanks for having me, guys. Yeah, great timing. We were able to train together last week at the 100 studio launch in New Jersey, Mo. So that was fantastic. And yeah, the US has been a very interesting and fast moving market for us so far. So I'm really looking forward to sort of talking about it and really what sort of the next 2-3 years holds, because yeah, the growth is looking substantial and really, really exciting.
I thought a good place to start, Michael, was to give us a big zoom out, big picture of what's going on in the space. As Mo said, it's something that we talk about a lot. It's probably an area that I'm not as involved in as what I should do. And I'm hoping at the end of this podcast that you convince me why I need to.
We've got to get you to a class. We have to get you to a class. There is one in Manhattan Beach. Michael, next time we're in the West Coast, Matthew has to go to a Strong class.
I have done Pilates once in my life, but I've, it's been a number of years, and I'm sure things have changed then. So give us a bit of an overview of the market. I understand that I did looking online that it's already a huge it's a huge industry. If the numbers that I've got here are correct, they reckon it's projected to hit 59 billion by 2030. So there certainly seems a long way to go. But give us your perspective. How do you get into Pilates? You know, what attracted you to that sector, and you know, what's it? How would you best describe it at the moment?
We were very lucky. We sort of came in on the precipice of the Pilates boom, I would say. It's been around for forever now, but it's held the number one spot for bookings globally for the last few years, as per ClassPass data. So there is a Pilates boom happening. The way we got into it and how we started Strong initially, myself and my business partner Mark, we were in the F45 space, and we're a franchisee. We own 6 franchises. We actually had the number one F45 globally in terms of revenue, so we won that award. And sort of towards the end of 2019, we sold out. We saw some definite opportunity in more of a low impact setting and more of a low impact space. Ironically, I'd broken my ankle at that time and was rehabbing on a reformer and fell in love with it. And all the sort of little issues I had in my body, whether it was sore knees, sore lower back, the ankle injury, everything dissipated within a matter of weeks. And so I felt like this was the place I wanted to look into. Mark was very much of the same mindset. But the problem was whenever I do a reformer workout, I always felt like I need to go for a run or do a heavy weight session, or I felt like I needed that little bit more. Mate, ironically at the time, and I think this is out your way, there was a studio in Newport Beach in California that had a Roformer. Myself and Mark saw that, jumped on a plane, checked it out, tried the workout, and it was the most brilliant, excruciating endorphin rush that we'd ever had. We both loved it. And it was a rower attached to a reformer. So it fused the conditioning component with the Pilates component. And myself and Mark thought, wow, like we need to get this back to Australia. We need to turn this into a franchise model. We had a lot of key learnings from F45, things that, that we learned that was incredible, things we felt we could do better. And so we packaged it up, negotiated the exclusive rights globally, and then rolled out our first sort of Strong Pilates franchise at sort of the end of 2019. So yeah, that's sort of how it all started. And, it did start as that sort of little bit more than Pilates. It was cardio with reformer. You can imagine you're doing a hard rower set, your heart rate stays elevated through the workout, and then you're going into, say, like a plank or a hold under resistance. So your heart rate is elevated for the entire workout. But what we discovered was this real need for strength training as well. And so we chose to focus on not only a conditioning and a Pilates element, but a strength element. And fusing the three together with Pilates, strength, and cardio just seemed to be like the ultimate combo for our consumers. It's what our consumers wanted, needed. And yeah, as we've sort of developed this, it really feels like that's the niche in which people want today. It's more than a Pilates class. I always think that when someone is paying, let's say, $70 a week or $75 a week for an unlimited membership, they will need more than just a Pilates workout. They do need conditioning for heart health. They need the strength training for longevity, to build lean muscle, all those things. So the combination has really seemed to hit. And today we're in 14 countries, 101 studios as of next week, and a huge expansion on the way.
That's incredible. I think timing, we are all entrepreneurs on this call, and I think both of you have been entrepreneurs longer than I have. But so much of being an entrepreneur is timing, having the right product for the right time. And I've even had people with my own company with Sweatworks say, "Hey, if I started something today, could you achieve the scale?" I don't think so. I just think for me it was timing. 2012, the meeting digital with fitness and all of that. And you started in 2019. And that, I would say, was the infancy of the longevity boom. And you just hit on it right now. When you look at some of the key pillars of longevity, it's mobility, it's VO2 max, it's strength. And with Strong Pilates, you're really hitting on 3 of the 4 or 5, depending on who you're talking to, pillars of longevity. At the same time, you hit on another boom, which is Pilates. Pilates in 2019 certainly was on the rise, but was not and is not what it is today. I mean, today Pilates is just on a rocket ship. So I think you formed this in 2019 and you're able to do that. The other thing I would add, which is really interesting, is your true scale came after the pandemic. So where you had a lot of brands, think about some brands which we'll talk about today, like Orange Theory Fitness or Exponential, or even large gyms, both corporate and franchise owned, who've already scaled before the pandemic. Now the pandemic hits and they've really had to support the whole ecosystem through this kind of like dark and really uncertain phase, well, you didn't really have your 100 studios then, right? So you weren't out there supporting all this. So you've kind of really timed so much from a modality perspective, your growth perspective. When I look back, and I've gotten to know you over the last couple of years, but you've kind of timed this, and some of this is just pure luck, right? Others of it might have been timing, and you've had the foresight to say, look, we're former F45 franchisees. We were on the other side. We know what works and doesn't work. So now we're going to build something the right way because we were where our franchisees are today. How much of your experience that you've had in the past by owning your own F45 studios with your co-founder Mark has played into what you're building today?
Yeah, hugely important. It's I think there's certainly things that F45 did exceptionally well. Early days, they from a brand and social media perspective, and I'm a marketer by trade, so I love studying sort of this side of the business. But from a brand perspective, they really blew up. They got their social media strategy right. We were number 10 in the world. So you can imagine, I think there's 1,400 F45s now. So we were number 10. So the call it the operational onboarding and systems required to run a franchise at scale weren't really in place then. So we had to figure a lot of this stuff out ourselves. So now they're a very different enterprise to what they were back then. So we've taken the good and the bad and the in between and really learned from a franchisee perspective what's important. And that's anything from having a good community of franchisees around you to the support that's required to um, you know working on a very successful business model from day one and getting the business model right, and just sort of overcompensating from a support perspective. But yeah, I would say it's hugely important to sort of where we've come to today. And the cool thing is, over 50% of our franchisees are now multi-site owners. That number was around 80%, but because we keep opening so many, that sort of comes down over time. But yeah, the franchisees are really sort of buying into what we're doing. They're making money, and yeah, it's just been a super important part of our sort of growth and sort of how we got here today.
What are your thoughts on the differences between what you're doing, which is boutique studios, and we've definitely been reading a lot about how that market is changing. There's a number of large brands in the boutique sector that have certainly been through a pretty tough time over the last sort of couple of years, and you have gone in with from what I understand, is a standalone studio model. So, what are you seeing that are some of the differences between the brands like, let's say, Snap, for example, that are now incorporating Pilates into their concept, and the standalone studios, and why? What's given you the confidence, and what's coming through in the numbers to show that that model still has legs based on, again, what's happening in the boutique market as a whole and how challenging that can be for some people, and the competition for some of the typical big box brands to be incorporating Pilates as part of a broader offering?
Yeah, I think a like for like product doesn't mean it's going to have the same impact. I'll give you an example, and I was actually thinking about this the other day. Um, you know, let's say you've got a steakhouse and a McDonald's starts serving steak. Um, they're not going to be concerned by the fact that McDonald's is serving steak because it's still McDonald's. People go to a steakhouse for the experience. They go for the service. They go for the community, maybe the social validation of it. I think it's very similar with boutique. You kind of need to dive into why the consumer goes to boutique. And the same consumer that goes to a boutique concept generally does not go to a big club. So there's so many intangible success factors. You've got your community connection, customer experience, customer validation, progression. I think specialization is a really, really big one. And also, one thing that I like about the boutique space is, we innovate very, very quickly. Um, I, I don't know how effective, and I'm sort of yet to see a meaningful amount of consumers within our business head from us through to a big box gym that's open to reformer concept. Like, it just hasn't happened yet. So it's a very interesting one. I still think there's so many differences and so many advantages to boutique. But look, it's going to be a bit of a wait and see to see what sort of impact it has on the market as a whole.
What do you think that you've been one of the most successful F45? So clearly it's not your first time in running a boutique studio and running a successful one. So what do you see, again, on a very high level, are some of the things that really make a successful boutique different from many of the others that are attempting to do it but just can't put it off and can't get it to make money? I think one of the I think when we spoke to Julian before, the amount of profit that some of these studios generate is extremely small, and so how do you turn it from being a hobby to be a genuine business opportunity?
Yeah, I mean, it certainly comes down to it's a lot of the standard stuff, the onboarding procedures, the studio manager training, the instructor training, and the guidance from the franchisor. I think the business model matters, and coaching the business model is very, very important. Like, you look at a brand like Club Pilates that has a fantastic business model, can go into a very small footprint, can have high utilization, and that business model is coached very, very well. I think it's about getting that right first. I think product certainly matters, and I'll give you an example there. So yeah, there's a huge Pilates boom. Today, Strong only has 5 locations in the US, so our brand equity is not up there like we are in Australia. We're almost a household name in Australia, but product matters. So what we're seeing now, we have 2 studios launching in West Hollywood and in Dallas, and from a marketing perspective, we're achieving $2 leads and $9 cost per acquisition. So it's only costing us $9 to sign a member in pre-sale. And I attribute that, it can't be to brand because we are still quite a small brand. I attribute that to the product and the unique product in a space that's booming. Outside of that, I mean, I think it's really important to focus on really 3 key metrics. One would be marketing, so that's your leads. 2 is sales, and that's conversion. And 3 is customer experience, and that's really the metric we look at there is the attrition rate. So focusing on those 3 things and figuring out and diagnosing what's actually going on within the studio is super important. And I think that methodology can be looked at across every type of boutique fitness offering out there. But again, I think we overlook product sometimes, and we just sort of diagnose and say, well, how can this product get better? Well, maybe the product itself needs to innovate. And the interesting thing, and I read this, when Expo offloaded Rumble recently, one of the first things Rumble did was bring in a strength-only class. And we know the rise of strength training now. So I think franchisors can really help franchisees by maybe diving into the consumer, what the consumer wants, because the consumer is very intelligent now. The consumer has access to so much information, and it's super important.
And I would add, Orange Theory also launched a strength-only class last year. When you look at those 2 brands, you look at Orange Theory, which is now Purpose Brands along with Anytime Fitness, and you look at Exponential, as you've mentioned. By and large, a lot of those, and there's exceptions certainly, but I think as a network, they've struggled post-pandemic. They've really struggled for a couple of reasons. One is, as Matthew mentioned, you've seen big box gyms like Lifetime on the premium segment, but even HVLPs, certainly Snap on the mid-market, but even HVLPs like EOS has come up, and I'm sure, Michael, you saw the same in Australia as well, but starting to incorporate boutique in it. What's unique about Pilates is that it's unlike cycling or running on a treadmill, it's actually a pretty hard modality to just take someone off the floor and say, you are now going to be a Pilates instructor. There's a lot of training and skill and precision involved. So I think that one is going to be a challenge. I think the other interesting thing about what your product offers, and you talked a bit about this, is there's one area that is familiar. So what I noticed about your classes, there'll be a lot of new people taking strong classes now in 3 countries. And the rowing component or the bike component, that is a piece that is familiar to someone. So when someone goes into another Pilates, like a club Pilates or a solid core, if they've never done Pilates before, the whole thing feels unfamiliar. But with Strong, at least there's one component that is familiar. But just kind of going back to the franchisor versus the franchisee, looking at how some of these other franchisees have struggled, where do you think they potentially fell short?
Look, I want to bring this back to product. Like I think the fitness industry moves so quickly, and like for us, and you know this, Mo, we work together, professionally.
Yeah.
The innovation button needs to be on all the time, and that doesn't mean like innovating in tech or innovating in machinery. That can be innovation in programming. That can be innovation in brand and marketing, and that's where I think the real issue lies. Is probably not enough consumer research discovering what your client wants, needs, values, and then being innovative enough and being progressive enough to be able to move with the market. That's what I feel is probably the big one. We're thinking 5 years ahead already with the tech developments, with incorporating the strength training, doing progressive overload blocks, stop, rest, start again, lift heavier, let's build lean muscle, let's follow the science here. I don't think it's good enough to just sort of set and forget with a lot of things. And I think it's really important that the industry follows the science because the consumer does.
I was recently listening to the Alex Hormozi. He just did a big launch last weekend, which is pretty impressive. If you don't follow him, I definitely recommend you check him out. But one of the things that he talked about is similar to what you've said here, is about product. Obviously, you can put a huge amount of money behind your marketing to generate leads, but if your product's not great, then that's not going to work. And you've touched on it a few times, and I just wanted to go in a little bit deeper because I think this is a really important subject to discuss. But your brand's known in Australia, as you mentioned. It isn't really known at all in the United States. It's a huge market. So when you put it out there on social media or anything like that, they're not going to have any recollection of who you are and whether this is a trusted brand and all of the things that you need to provide confidence in people coming in your studio. So I was really just curious from a marketing perspective, number one is what have you done to be able to get people through the doors that's been successful? And then to second to that, how have you positioned the product particularly? Because there are so many, like if you put Pilates in Google, there's just so many people that are offering it. So what is it? Is it about the offer or the promise that you're making to people to get them in? Because clearly something that you're doing in a new market's been working. But I just be curious to sort of understand, those key parts. One, from a marketing perspective, what's got them through the doors, and then two, what's helped to increase the conversion rate based on the fact that you've got a ton of competition in a very sort of well-established marketplace.
Yeah, and I'll bring this back to Hormozi. And this is one of actually his quote. It's create undeniable evidence, right? And we do a lot of member surveying, and I think our most recent survey we had an 8.8 out of 10 rating for programming. So there's a lot of these things that we do, and then we hero them from a marketing perspective. I think the novelty of having a rower or a bike with a reformer and strength training fused is enough to keep people interested, and keep them engaged and really want them to at least come in and try it. But yeah, it's just it's been more about creating the evidence within the consumer and then amplifying the results based off the consumer sentiment. The marketing promotion is a big one, but I still, and another Hormozi one, brand surpasses everything. His little quote that he does, I still think product heroes everything. And I think just talking about the concept and getting it out there has been very helpful from a pre-sale perspective. Now, next year we'll open, I think there's about 110 LOIs in the US. We'll open about 40 locations in the US next year alone. There's about 150 sites sold now as well across the US. And the strategy for us is not about becoming a national brand from day one. It's about becoming a trusted and exciting brand within a suburb, and then within a city, and then within a state, and growing from there. It is, and boutique is the biggest intangible success factor is community, and I think referral is highly undervalued. So just focusing on sort of local markets is really key for us, and yeah, it's going to be a really exciting year. But so far, Matthew, like every studio that's launched in the US for us has opened with 300 to 500 people on packs or memberships, and I really do think the unique style of the workout is really the hero here.
Well, something that's been in the news, especially the last couple of weeks, is this topic of ClassPass. I think we're going to come back and do a more deep dive episode on just the history of ClassPass and where it stands today. And Michael, I know you and I were just sharing texts over the weekend about this topic and this movement in New York. I think it was led by a creative director of Tone House who wanted to have almost like a ClassPass free month for the month of August. And there's been this hesitation and this push against ClassPass. Personally, we're going to be announcing at ABC Fitness a new partnership with ClassPass coming up hopefully in the next couple of months. I've gotten a chance to know the team. I think going back to when ClassPass first came out, I was always a little bit at arm's length with how to integrate them. Is this a pro? Is it a con? Is it going to condition the consumer to expect something at a certain value when really the perceived value is much higher? And you couldn't help the comparisons to things like Groupon, which was around even before that. And I know you've also had a similar journey, Michael, as it relates to ClassPass, where I think initially, at least from what we were chatting, you were hesitant, maybe didn't have a positive experience towards it. But to me, like any other tool, it really comes down to how disciplined you are in using any tool, candidly. You could either abuse a tool or you could use it as an acquisition method if used smartly. And then you've got to build the mechanics to convert someone from being a ClassPass member to becoming a full member. And we've seen clubs successfully do that. So would love to just get your take on ClassPass, this movement in New York, and really there's a lot of boutique studios that are almost violently against ClassPass, but I'm looking at this saying it also brought a lot of people to you. Now, the fact that you couldn't convert them to becoming a more premium member, is that more on ClassPass or is that more on you or is it more on your product?
I guess the problem is it's for the studio or the boutique offering or the gym or the massage therapist or whatever it is, ClassPass it's an exceptional offering for the consumer. We like it. We of our $32 million in network revenue last year, I think less than 2 million was ClassPass. So let's call it less than 5%. So for us, we use it as fillers. We utilize their sliding scale where if the class is busy and someone from ClassPass comes in, they're going to pay a premium for that spot. But on the other hand, if it's empty, they're probably only going to get $8, $9, $10, $11 in the studio will only get that in revenue for the class. So I think there's pros and cons. It's we like it, but I can see why almost low performing studios may have an issue with it. And I can also see, and I think ClassPass they know this intimately, that if they get too big, it can become a problem. And I know in markets like Singapore where there are a lot of ClassPass users, the studio owner or the brand needs to really negotiate with ClassPass to ensure that they're bottom. So let's say the cheapest value for their class isn't too low where it's going to ruin their business model. So look, I can see pros and cons to both. Again, I agree with you. Like if it's utilized the right way, it's a great tool. We've converted quite a few ClassPass goers, but there are a whole lot more that we haven't. So yeah, the jury's not out, put it that way.
Do you think that some of it has got to do with what you've mentioned earlier, whereas people that, maybe people are using ClassPass relatively successfully, maybe the ClassPass represents a large percentage of their income, and maybe they're one of many businesses that are offering a very, very similar service. And so look, probably what it sounds like, and I've not really gone into it, but looking at ClassPass as being the problem may be a misunderstanding of probably what's going on in the business, whereas really all they're doing is providing leads, but you're essentially not able to convert those leads yourself. So it comes back to what you said earlier, which is your product probably isn't strong enough on its own to really do what it's supposed to do. So you're sort of indirectly relying too much on a bit of a crutch that you've got to solve in another way rather than just boycotting ClassPass. I'm just sort of wondering whether the solution, the problem is a little bit deeper than maybe what it sounds like on the surface.
There's probably a little bit of that, but I think there's also a huge amount of ClassPass users that will never come across to a gym because they get too much value and too many options, and they get it at such a good price. So, I think there's a bit of both. Again, I think the ClassPass needs to work with your business model, and you need to work with them to ensure that it's priced accordingly and it works. Otherwise, if it doesn't, don't use them. But there's an old saying, people bring people. And if you have quiet classes and you just need to fill those classes with bums on seats and literally have people there, you have much higher opportunity at converting members. Like, there is nothing worse than going to a boutique class with 2 or 3 people. If you go to a session with 15, 18, 20 people in there, the energy's high. And generally it's much easier to convert members because people follow people. They really do. And people like doing what's cool, and they like the energy in the community and all the things associated with what make boutique fitness great. ClassPass can support that. So yeah, interesting topic.
Well, we're almost at time. And just typically, Michael, we wrap up our episodes with the final thoughts. I'd love to start with you in terms of, do you have a key takeaway from this episode, or what are you looking? I mean, there's so much happening in your life, moving here, the growth of Strong. Any key takeaways that the audience should look forward to in 25?
I think that a bit of a theme with today's chat has been product and focusing on the consumer. I think, the biggest question I actually get is, should I scale? Like, should I start a franchise from like 1-2 studio owners that want to grow the business? And my answer is always, it's always the same. It's open, and then go into hyperdrive of identifying what your consumer wants, needs, and values, and innovate like crazy until you get there. So I think the key thing is, like, in this industry and where we've been successful, is just diving into what the consumer wants and making the product work for them. And really that's really been the key driver to our success.
A heavy focus on product and really meeting the consumer where they are. Matthew, any key takeaways for you?
I'd like to use this as an opportunity to ask another question for Michael, really. As someone that's sort of been on a similar journey, opened businesses and ran businesses around the world, and then coming to the US and realized that I was, in some cases totally blindsided by everything I thought I knew. Suddenly was very, very different when I got here. I'd like to understand from you, Michael, like, when you came here, you'd obviously done, I'm sure you'd done all your due diligence and checked it out and traveled a lot and asked a lot of questions. But what was probably one of the biggest areas where you were blindsided in some respect, where it was like, look, this was something that you didn't expect that you had to overcome when you got here? And I think this is really to sort of all entrepreneurs, where you kind of, I'm not sure what the saying is, whether it was Mike Tyson or someone, to say, like, your best plans go to crap when someone thumps you on the nose. So I was just wondering, like, when what was the situation when you got thumped on your nose, and how did you overcome that?
It's a good question. I don't think we've quite been thumped on the nose yet, but it's, we are the black sheep of the Pilates industry, so we cop a lot of flack from the traditionalists in this space, and it's now being in the US and biggest fitness market in the world. The sheer population and opportunity here is incredible, which is something I definitely undervalued moving over here. But dealing with the negative comments has been a really big one for us, because we're not well liked in the Pilates space. We really aren't. We've literally got a rower and strength training and a bike, and we've broken all the rules. So dealing with that and learning to deal with the criticism has been a really, it's been a really nice growth pathway for me. And and now I'm sure it's going to, as we grow, it will keep coming, and something we need to keep dealing with. So yeah, that's really been the big one.
Mo, any takeaways from you on today's episode?
I'm going to, just discuss something which we didn't even talk about in this episode, which is I read this recent study. You all know I'm into wearables and I love wearables, but I'm also really thoughtful on how do we use them. In fact, I think Michael and I, when we first met, maybe 2 years ago at this point, talking about doing corporate wearables at Strong. And I think we both, said now it's not the time, like there's a time and place for it. But interesting thing here. So there's a new study which came out. I read this new study, this research study, and what it did is that it was funded by the European Health Council. And what it did is that it looked at, is the stress that you correlate in wearables, that when a wearable tells you you're stressed, like my Oura Ring or another wearable you have, does it actually correlate to how you actually feel? So they gave about, let me just pull up the specifics here, but they gave almost 800 people Garmin wearable. And here's what they found. So then, and they followed them and tracked them. So first it said that sleep was pretty solid alignment. If your wearable said you slept well, you actually slept well. But then the other two, one, how tired you are and the energy level, was a very, very weak correlation. And the one that was alarming is stress. There was zero correlation. So with 800 people, there was no correlation between your wearable telling you that you're stressed and you actually feeling stressed. Now, Matthew, you and I, when we travel together, we're looking at our Oura scores and we're probably stressing ourselves out from the Oura scores and saying, my wearable is telling that I'm stressed, but in reality, you're probably not even stressed. So I think the learning for me here is that it's more important to go by how you feel and not overly rely on your wearable. And I think that's true with training. It's true with really anything else. Is sometimes you just got to put the data aside. You could track it to look at long-term trends, but in the moment and how you're doing right now, it doesn't even matter. And this was a pretty alarming study because it's the first one that I've seen that actually essentially said that, not that the data is garbage, it's certainly good to come out of the wearable data, but when it relates to specifics and how you're feeling in the moment, there's zero correlation between your data and your wearable and actually how you feel. So I thought that was my key takeaway for this week.
Well, that's it for today. Michael, thank you very much for joining us. It's been a great conversation. When you're out on the West Coast, let me know. Maybe Mo can come out as well and we'll get a workout in.
Sounds great. Thanks so much for having me on. It was a good discussion.
Thanks for listening. And if you've enjoyed this episode, please give us a like, subscribe to the channel, and please share it with 1 or 2 other people. Thanks for listening.